like I was saying, we are going to omit the sections in this chapter for right now, for this lecture, over classification. Let me just tell you what pages those are so you know. Chapter 1, page 3, it says, how can microbes be classified? We're not doing that right now, so just pretend like that. Page 4 and page 5. And page 6 are not there, okay? We'll start doing classification, and I like to put that together because to me it makes your brain go two different directions, all right? So pages what? 3, did I say 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm sorry if I said 7. 7 is starting the golden age. We need that page, all right? And then we stop on page 18, okay? That's where it starts the modern age of microbiology. The only thing we will need past that page is table 1.3 on page 19.
So 7 through 17 and then
7 through 18, let's just go ahead and say 18 because you're going to need that big, well, 17, because you're going to need that figure 1.19 and then table 1.3. Okay, that's all you're going to need on 18 and 19, those tables.
figure what?
Figure 1.19, okay? And it's saying the biologists and the modern disciplines. We'll talk about that as we go along. And then page 19, table 1.3, the fields of biology. Those are going to be relevant, okay? And of course, pages 1 and 2. So pages 1 and 2, then we skip. Start with page 7 through 17, like you said, very good. And then remember those two tables. Figure 1.19, which really looks more like a table to me. And then table 1.3 on page 19. All right, if you've got the PowerPoints, go ahead and download them if that's something you want to use, because basically I do go along with those PowerPoints. Do remember, I'm going to kind of add some stuff, so do make sure that you take good notes. All right, there's a couple of people that are not listed in the textbook. You need to make sure you have them as well, all right? So this is like one of the most exciting chapters because thanks to all these people, we know what we now know. If it wasn't for them, we'd still believe that, for example, if you had something bad happen to you and you caught an infectious disease and you died from it, it's because you were just a bad person. Shame on you. Okay, that was what we actually believed for centuries. And some of you are looking back and thinking, yeah, that is something that was a precedent for a very long time, okay? So I kind of want to put that preface in our mind that people didn't think the way we think now hundreds of years ago, okay? Even your grandparents, even some people, how many of you are in the medical field right now? Nobody is actually even sitting at a desk helping a doctor, nothing. I don't have any CNAs, I don't have anybody that's an LVN. Okay. Well, if you've ever been around it, okay, you may have at one point in time in your life, you may have a relative that's in the medical field, because that's usually what stems people's interest a lot of times. We know that it's a decent paying job, but it's definitely not the money because you're going to work yourself to the bone. Those of you that are getting really excited about that, right? It's hard work. We know that some people still believe some pretty far-fetched things, okay? We may even have some of those people that we know that believe some things that you go, okay, in this modern society, how do you believe this? Well, they used to believe it hundreds of years ago, and some people just have trouble changing their philosophies. All right, so we're going to start off with around the 1600s. Now, am I concerned that you know exactly when this time frame is? No, I don't care. But around the 1600s, we had a very significant person who was our very first person to send in reports and verify single-celled life. Okay? And that person was Antoine von Leeuwenhoek. Okay, very funny name here. Hopefully you guys can see that. If not, feel free to come up here and take pictures of this board. It's Antoine von Leeuwenhoek. It's a very difficult name, and if you want to look at it, it's on page 2 in your textbook. Antoine von Leeuwenhoek. He's the first person to validate that we have single-celled organisms living. Okay. Interesting thing, in this era, did we really have a label of scientist? No, we really didn't. Okay? We did not really have a true labeling of a scientist. Most people were just labeled as philosophers. Okay? Especially when we get back further before the 1600s. Philosophers, the category of philosophy was scientist. Some of you going, okay, this is going to be very interesting. Priest. Yeah. And then your philosophers such as Aristotle and those that you understand as philosophy, right? Okay. Thinkers. Those were all categorized in the same category. That's why a lot of your first scientists were also monks. You may have studied that whenever you looked at some other things in biology. A lot of your first scientists were actually monks in monasteries. Okay? They had the time to research and study and send that research off. Okay? We don't know that you did any research unless you have some sort of documentation, right? Were there very, very many people in the 1600s that could read and write? No. Typically it was people that were philosophers. So therefore your scientists do not put in that category. However, Leeuwenhoek was not a philosopher at all. It's a very interesting thing. He was Dutch, Danish, I should say. Oh, he was Danish, from the Netherlands. He was actually just a merchant, okay? He was a high-level merchant, but that's what he did. He bought and sold goods. Who was he a scientist? So typically, scientists have understudies, right? Leeuwenhoek did not have an understudy. He had no one. Okay. So the things that I'm about to tell you about Leeuwenhoek died with him. Okay, so that's why when Leeuwenhoek came along, he gave all these discoveries to us and did not tell us how to create the first, how he created the first microscope. It lay dormant for about 200 years. Okay. So he created the first microscope. We'll go ahead and say that. Okay. It's very basic. It's showing in your textbook. And that is figure 1.2. Those of you that don't have a textbook, I understand that there's some issues getting textbooks. Don't panic. That picture is also in the PowerPoints. Okay. Leeuwenhoek's first microscope. And it's basically nothing more than that was a very circle. And a basic metal board, a little groove on the end of it, and the very tip, I have a 4 tip here, looks like a toothpick, and you just take that little tip off, and on the other side there's a glass, okay, on this little piece right here, a glass lens. You take that little tip off, dip it in something, put that tip back on, and then you look through the other side. Literally. Okay? Hold it. But way different from the microscopes we used the other day, right? how you view the organism, okay? So that was the very first microscope. It's figure 1.2, where they do a reproduction of living books. Microscope, and they show that. Okay. Very basic structure. All right, so let me kind of go back to what he was. He was a merchant. Okay. So, how in the world did he get off of this? Merchants buy and sell lots of things, right? He was more focused on buying and selling fine linens. Okay? So those of you that are into buying nice linens, like really nice bed sheets, what's the important thing that you look at? Thread count. Can you see thread count with your naked eye? No. Okay? So Leeuwenhoek spent lots of time and went to great efforts to create and grind down and create glass that he could magnify and see thread count. He started viewing this and studying thread count, and he started seeing other things. Obviously, there's stuff on it. He started getting curious. Like most people that are scientists, they get curious, they make an observation, they see things, I wonder. And then he went from there. He started studying fecal matter. He started studying plaque under teeth. Okay? He started studying this. He found out the mouth is a disgusting place. Back in those days, did we have toothpaste and a toothbrush? No. We were doing good to have all of our teeth by the time we were 35, right? At one time. We didn't have any antibiotics, remember that. If you got a cut, you were probably dead. Okay? So just think about how many times you cut yourself nowadays. I hope not intentional. Sorry, that was a really bad joke. I hope that you, now I got so down. But regardless, whenever you would cut yourself, I mean, you weren't going to survive for a long time. So you get an infection. You get an infection, there was nothing to treat it with. Okay? Doctors would wave wands over the top of you and hope you got better. Okay? We're going to continue to talk about how unsanitary things were in that era today as we go through. And if I get through this chapter, we won't talk about it again, but too much. But if not, we'll continue this next Wednesday. All right, so Leeuwenhoek brings us to a lot of things going on a little bit later down the road. But let's go ahead and talk about the place that he would send in his research to. It was called the Royal Society of London. All right, so back in those days, they didn't have a lot of archives and libraries. We didn't have the World Wide Web, all that wonderful stuff. What we had was a group of individuals that we considered to be extremely intelligent and really up on the modern society. We called them the Royal Society of London. Okay, so you would submit your research and your findings to them. They would review it, and then they would archive it. So there's an official archive of that material. Okay? Just some interesting thing that you probably will never use, or you might use it if you're ever going to study Leonardo da Vinci. Is it the right person? Okay. Leonardo da Vinci did a lot of scientific research as well. I know y'all are sitting here going, he's an artist. Artists gotta get paid, right? A lot of the stuff that he did was actually for a lot of the findings here, where he would actually go in and look at bodies and examination. And y'all know some of his famous pictures, right? One of his very famous pictures in the anatomical structure, yeah. Okay, why? Because he was hired by a lot of people that did research that was submitted to the Royal Society of London. Yeah, he's got stuff in the Royal Society of London that's his picture.